Okay.
Baseball. So
Baseball.
Gianni Verschuren. I'm sorry,
Gianni
Gianni.
Verschuren, he's the tie guy. He's the guy that comments on all my ties. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
We
Well,
love Gianni.
We do.
Johnny, he says, so I'll repeat my question from last time to see if we will have any coverage of baseball and the effects of the war on players like Ted Williams. But more importantly, please show us a better look if episode 193 Kilroy was here, Ty. I got to see it. So I think you like
Okay, well, when this edited comes out, we can put in like right now a close up on me and the Kilroy was here tie. I saw your comment about that. You said the vest covers it up too much, and I have to see that magnificent tie or magnificent beast or something like that. But I'm surprised that you.
We can send the tie to we can send a picture of it directly to you, Johnny. I'm sure that Astrid is a huge Gianni fan, and our whole tie thing came from the idea that we wanted to be a little bit different than we'd been in the past and create sort of an every week look for like normal people do. You don't dress the same every week for 6 years. So,
well, I did on the Great War.
Yeah, you do, but that was not the way. That's the point.
But that was what I wore in real life.
No, but that was in the 1910s. People had less clothes.
That's true. That's true.
The 1940s was more of an explosive fashion time. So Astrid wanted to be true to that. And she went on eBay and she got enormous amounts of ties. And
she still does.
That's how it started. And for a long time, we were selling these ties every week.
Yeah.
But right now, she's actually doing something special. She's gathering all of the ties that Indy is using in every episode. They're numbered. They're put in boxes. They may be reused at some point, but if the war is over, you will have the possibility of getting one of those ties.
But we already sent one to Johnny, though, right? Because I remember that.
We did, but it was a bit of a sad story because I don't know if you got a new one, Johnny. I hope you did. But this was in the early days of COVID, and Astrid sent his favorite or your favorite ties, Johnny, to you. And they got lost in the mail. They just disappeared. It's quite sad. Astrid speaks about it over and over again. And she says, I got to send new ties to Johnny. So, Johnny, we'll show you the tie in a direct message.
Hey, just so you know, a slight thing I just noticed that's going to be something for technical issues and people who are watching this live can go, oh, they're doing this live. For some reason, as soon as we started recording, your voice is no longer playing in my AirPods, but is playing from the computer, even though preferences on the computer say it is playing in my AirPods. Well, I'll leave them in.
Well,
and every now and then let's see, talk.
Okay.
Nope, didn't make a difference. They went boom when I put them back in. Well, okay, I'll just turn you down here so we don't get too much feedback, and we'll sort that out later. Because I'd love to answer Johnny's question. But there's still more to say about the ties, by the way. Because when we started doing the ties, and we had all these ties, and people started wanting to buy them, then I had to create Indy's Tie Barn, right? To sell them. And I think those might be my favorite videos I've ever made, are the videos for Indy's Tie Barn. When at the end of an episode, Astrid would say, okay, take off the tie, now tell me what the tie is about. And I just have to make stuff up. And it was entirely improv. And if you watch those 40 or 50 videos about the different ties, I think that's some of the best comedy I've ever done. I don't know if you guys agree, but...
I love it. I mean, I've spent many hours watching Tie Barn videos just because they're funny.
Really weird.
I'm a fanboy.
Cut off. But anyhow, Johnny, to answer your question, which is for some of our fans a bit niche, because about 55% of our audience doesn't really have any interest in baseball, I would assume, because they don't live
55%.
Well, Japan, the United States, the Dominican Republic, places where they play baseball, then sure, they'd be interested in the answer to this question. But
yeah, but Johnny is a baseball fan and he's not American.
It's because Johnny's a discerning gentleman. I've seen his comments about my ties. But the question was, let's see, you wrote it out for me here, Ian. Will we have any coverage of baseball and the effect of the war on players like Ted Williams? What he means is Ted Williams was he was a huge star. He's still regarded as one of the best players, best hitters in history. And he broke in 1939. And in 1941, he became the last player to hit 400 for a season. 1942, he won the Triple Crown. And then he missed 1943, 44, and 45, being in the Second World War. And he came back just where he picked up. And he also fought in the Korean War, and he missed like 2.5 seasons for the Korean War. So when he retired in 1960, he has these fantastic career numbers, but people thought, well, if without the seasons, or with the seasons, he wouldn't have missed in wartime. He may well have had like the all-time home run record, which was Babe Ruth's 714 at the time. And yeah, it's possible. But I think more than him and like a pitcher like Bob Feller, who did not get 300 wins, or Ted Lyons, who also did not get 300 wins because they spent 3 or 4 years serving in the military. Beyond those guys are Hall of Famers. Those guys had their careers back. If I was going to do a special, one, it wouldn't be just baseball, because other nations have sporting leagues where star players were affected by the war. But two, it would be about those players who were stars but had their careers derailed because of the war. And again, Ted Williams is a Hall of Famer. We still regard him as one of the greatest players of all time. Cecil Travis, on the other hand, before the war, the last 4 or 5 years before the war, was absolutely on an all-time Hall of Fame trajectory. A brilliant player, brilliant fielder, brilliant hitter. And, he had some issues in the war. I think it was him that had the frostbite toes, although I might be confusing that with someone else, but I'm pretty certain it was him. And he came back and he was still good, but he wasn't Cecil Travis anymore. And his career didn't last that long after the war. And of course, he's not in the Hall of Fame. And the casual fan has no idea who Cecil Travis is today, where even people that aren't baseball fans have heard of Joe DiMaggio and stuff, So I think if we were going to do a special, it would more likely be a special about the fate of athletes that were robbed of their immortality by the war, shall I say, right?
Well, yeah, both literally and not. But I mean, there's also a continuation of all of that, and that's what happens after the war. How sport becomes a way for reconciliation. I mean, we started when Indy and I started. Actually, when Indy, I, and Astrid started working together on historical stuff, our first project was about the 1896 Olympics, how they came about, and how Pierre de Coubertin created that. And a ridiculous amount about early Olympic history. And his idea was basically that the world could come together in celebration of the differences of nations, but also the greatness of individual athletes, and find a peaceful way towards competition instead of war. Very difficult topic, and it didn't really come through. I mean, you should watch our episode about the 1936 Olympics to see how Pierre de Coubertin's idea was very much then instrumentalized to create the very opposite of what he wanted to achieve. But if you go into after World War II, there's a huge event, and that's the first World Cup in the 1950s, 56, when the Germans are allowed to come back and compete. And this has become national mythology here in Germany. I mean, it's a huge thing, but it was also a huge thing back then in the day. And ever since World War II, sport has grown bigger than ever before, and has remained both a tool for political manipulation and a way to actually diffuse conflict.
Do you remember a very, very entertaining movie, but one of the dumbest movies about World War II ever, Escape to Victory, with Sylvester Stallone and Max von Sydow? Did you see that?
Yeah, of course I do.
When it's about, all these prisoners of war held by the Nazis are going to play a big soccer football game against the German team. And Sylvester Stallone is this American guy who doesn't actually really know how to play. So he ends up being their goalkeeper. Of course, he ends up being great. But
because goalkeepers don't need to know how to play.
No, they don't need it. But he was good at catching stuff because I guess he played American sports for some reason. I haven't seen it in like 25 years. I remember Max von Sydow being a German general, and he applauding the prisoners when they made good plays, and the high command didn't like that. And then they all escaped.
How many times was Max von Sydow a German general actually in his almost 100 years of life?
Probably at least once for every year of life. Yeah.
I would suspect it. Yeah. I mean, the go-to solution if you can't find a German to play a German, get a Swede.
It'd be like, okay, I'm pitching a film. Okay, guys, I got this film idea, right? It's 1943, right? And it takes place in the German army, right? Is Max von Sydow in it? Yeah, I was thinking we'd get Max von Sydow. That's how it always goes. He's part of the pitch.
Yeah. I think it's greenlit.
Yeah.
Actually, he did one of my favorite intros to a movie. I'm not a big Lars von Trier fan, but the movie Zentropa, which is also about the post-war period in Germany, takes place in 1945, just after the war has ended. And he did the opening to that, and it's a train ride that goes through tunnels, and Max von Sydow's amazing deep voice comes in, and he goes like, on the count of 10, you will be in Europa. 9. You are traveling into darkness. And it just goes on like that. It's massive. It's so cool.
And the best thing about Max von Sydow is his name is Max von Sydow. That's a bad guy's name.
It is.
It's a bad guy's name.
No, he was almost as tall as I am.
Yeah? Did he have a complex about that?
Well, we all do.
I thought he had a complex because he was not quite as tall as Spartacus Olsen was.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. Yeah. I never met Max. I would have loved to.
I would have loved to meet him too. I've got to answer the second part of that baseball question. Sorry. Hey, Indy, will you ever make more Sunday baseball videos? I've never been into baseball, but I love your baseball videos. And that's signed Sionra. And that's the best compliment you could have. It's like, okay, I remember I saw Prodigy play at the Lollipop Festival in Stockholm in 1996. The first time I saw Prodigy play. And I thought, I don't particularly like the Prodigy's music. I don't dislike it, but it's not something I would listen to at home. But I would always go to see them live because that's the best live show. So if someone says to me, I'm not interested in baseball, but I really like your show about baseball, then yeah. And that's the season we made was in 2013. For those of you who don't know, it was the very first thing I ever did on YouTube. It was just with a couple of friends, just a thing about weirdness of the magic weirdnesses of baseball history. And when we did it, I think there were 16 episodes, and at the end of it, I had like 200 subscribers. And people write in and say, I found your show, and it's really funny, and it's because it is funny, it's good. And now, of course, people have found it because I'm famous from YouTube, but it's still only 700,000 or 800,000 subscribers, and people write 1,000, not 100,000, write every week. When are you doing more of these? When are you doing more of these? And I wrote like basic synopses for like the next 50 episodes. I was ready to do. I have like the actual plot lines for them. It's really a question of time. I mean, other than doing finishing the weekly World War II stuff, I would rather do Sunday baseball than the specials and things that I actually have to do. And that's honest. I mean, I enjoy doing them, but I would prefer to do Sunday baseball because it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I think the reason the person who doesn't like baseball but isn't interested in baseball, but likes the series, is because the show isn't just so much about baseball, but is baseball as a cultural idiom and how so much of the history is changed by the weirdness and stuff, especially in the 1880s and 1890s that I like to talk about and stuff. It's just a question of time.
If this didn't come across in what Indy just said, Indy is actually a bona fide baseball historian. We have tested him at many points and asked him for batting averages and stuff from absolutely obscure years, and he just spits them out as if it was fresh in memory to him. It's a fascinating thing.
It's funny because that was sort of. I mean, I love statistics and baseball is a game of numbers. But when my mom gave me a book called Inside Baseball by Arthur Daly when I was a kid, and he had written it in 1950, and she gave it to me in like 1975. When she started taking me, my English mom took me to baseball games, and she was the only parent that liked baseball, and I was the only of the 5 kids, or 4 at the time, that liked baseball. So I'd go with her, 10 or 15 games a year. And so she gave me, and I was interested in the baseball history and who these players were. I'd heard about Babe Ruth and Honus Wagner. So she gave me this book. It was written basically for like teenagers, like 13, 14-year-olds. And I was a bit young, but I plugged my way through it. And Arthur Daly had been a sports writer, and he had written all these columns through the middle and beyond the middle of the 20th century. And it was called Inside Baseball, a half century of our national pastime. And it had sections called Day Before Yesterday, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And day before yesterday were the players that were famous from in 1900 to 1920. And yesterday was 1920 to 1940. And today was 1940 to 1950. And tomorrow was players in, like, when he was writing this in 1949 or 1950 that he thought were going to be big stars in the future. He was actually wrong about most of them, but that's what made it really interesting, because they were, people that seemed like, some of them he was right. Yogi Berra he was right about. But that book, I remember, I still vividly remember running downstairs, and I'm like 7 or 8 years old, and going, Mom, guess what? She's like, what? I go, did you know that from 1921 to 1925, over that entire 5-year period altogether, Rogers Hornsby actually averaged 403. He had a 400 batting average for a 5-season period. And Mom's like, so, wow, son, that's great. And I was like, yeah. And from 1921 to 25, he hit 397, 401, 389, 424, and 403. And yes, those are his actual batting averages. You can look it up, look up Rogers Hornsby, and those are his batting averages from 1921 to 1925. I can tell you some more of his batting. Like, for example, in 1928 with the Braves, he hit 387, still the Braves' 20th century record. And in 1929 with the Cubs, he hit 380, still the Cubs' 20th century record. But that's
bless Mrs. Nidell, the poor woman.
But Mom was like, she's like, what the fuck have I done? Like, because I used to do that all the time. I go, Mom, you're not gonna believe it. Harry Heilman.
Hang on, Indy. Does that question refer to giving you the book or giving birth to you?
It was giving me the book and starting me on the path to, because all I wanted for Christmas or birthdays for years was books about baseball history, which of course the only way you can compare stuff is the numbers and the stats and things like that. And so I would I just drink it in. So yeah.
Have you ever thought about writing a book about it?
No.
Why not?
Yeah, I have thought about writing books about it, but that's not what I do now. I write scripts now. I had an idea, and Johnny, this might interest you. I had an idea for a 20-part series called Dead Ball, right? That followed the dead ball era, began in 1901 and ended in 1920, and there's reasons for that which I won't get into. But it would literally be a season by season, which is it's a great evolution of American pop culture, American politics, American jingoism, as seen through the eyes of the evolution of baseball, which was of course the most popular sport by far in the United States. I mean, and it's certainly the most spectator sport that you play. Horse racing was very popular as well, but beyond that. But it also has to do a lot with gambling and the rise of the mega gamblers before Prohibition and stuff. But yeah, it's an idea, and I would love to get like financing by the Hall of Fame, but I'd also have to have the time to write it, because I'm still writing this World War II series, and I have no idea how long that's going to last,